In short, our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men, and to become the world's leading spacefaring nation. We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Kennedy Library. We are so excited to have you all here, and we can't wait to hear your ideas. I'm thrilled to welcome Hannah Jones, CEO of the Earthshot Prize, which has come to Boston because they know that the smartest students, the most committed climate warriors, and the most innovative scientists are all right here. And thank you to Matt Holzer and the Boston Green Academy for making it possible for all of you to join us today. We're honored to welcome Lieutenant Governor-elect Kim Driscoll and E.P.A. Associate Minister Enobakhare, who will tell us what government is doing to solve the climate crisis. And they can take your ideas back to Governor Healy and President Biden. And you have the best moderator on planet Earth, my daughter Tatiana. She got interested in nature and climate change when she was in middle school. She wrote a book about it and is now an award-winning climate journalist and John F. Kennedy Library board member. When we all learned that Prince William was going to announce the Earthshot Prize winners in the United States this year, we wrote him a letter explaining why Boston would be the perfect place. This year marks the 60th anniversary of my father's historic speech committing the United States to a moon landing, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. At that time, no one was sure that we could do it. The United States had only conducted 4 short space flights. The computers and necessary materials hadn't been invented yet, and scientists didn't know what exactly the surface of the moon was made of. But my father understood the power of the idea. He knew that the goal would bring out the best in us, that it would require teamwork, creativity, innovation, and commitment, and that it would make life better here on Earth. We're in a similar moment now. The climate crisis is one of the hardest, most complicated challenges we've ever faced. And we're honored and inspired that Prince William and the Earthshot Prize have found meaning in President Kennedy's legacy. So it's up to you now. Starting today, we're counting for 60 more years into the future so that you can look back and say, we're the generation that saved the life of our planet. Thank you. Now, we wouldn't be able to gather without the support and commitment of the person who has really made it possible for the Earthshot Prize to come to the library and done so many other things for the city of Boston. Sandy Edgerly has been the leader of the Boston Host Committee and has been committed to student success in Boston for many years. She and her husband, Paul, share my father's belief that courage is the most important quality, and they have helped the library celebrate our Profiles in Courage Award as well. I know that in this room there are students who are and will become courageous advocates for a cleaner, greener, healthier, more just, and peaceful world, and that Sandy and Paul will help them on their path. So please welcome Sandy Edgerly.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Kennedy, for that very kind introduction and those inspirational words, and for helping to bring this extraordinary event to Boston. It's so exciting. I know that we're all so proud of your family's incredible legacy. Your father, yourself, and your daughter, just entire generations really devoted to making the world a better place. So thank you for everything that you have done to make the world a better place. We're very excited to be here today in partnership with the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation and the City of Boston in support of Prince William's Earthshot Prize. As co-chair of the Earthshot Prize for Boston 2022 host committee, I'd love to thank the generous sponsors who are helping to bring the Earthshot Prize ceremony to Boston, including E.P.A, Bank of America, Liberty Mutual, John Hancock, and CVS Health. I'd also like to acknowledge Related Beal, thank you Aisha and your team, for also underwriting this student town hall, providing a chance for all of us to be together and to learn from the young voices that are driving so much of the movement for a greener planet. I'm so honored to be here today with all of you and also with our esteemed panelists, Tatiana Schlossberg, who's going to be the most amazing moderator, Associate Administrator Rosemary Enobakhare, and Lieutenant Governor-elect Kim Driscoll. I'm also looking forward to hearing from the Boston Green Academy student presenters. I stand here today so inspired by all of you and the commitment of young people who really are on the front lines fighting for sustainability and climate justice. Through my work with various youth organizations, locally and nationally, and from raising our own 4 children, I know that climate change weighs heavily on the minds of young people. Like President Kennedy's moonshot 60 years ago, the Earthshot Prize gives us hope about what is possible when people join together in pursuit of a common goal. Because the ultimate gift that we can give to young people is the gift of the future. A healthy planet, a platform to realize bold ambitions, and a just and sustainable world. Thank you again to all of you for being here and for all that you are doing to create a better future here on Earth. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the Earthshot Prize CEO, Hannah Jones, who's going to give an overview of the prize and its goals to catalyze solutions and repair our planet over the next 10 years. I just want to say that Hannah Jones is an absolute rock star. She had an incredible career, 20-year career at Nike, and although is from the UK, Wales, spent many of her years in the U.S. in Portland, Oregon, and then after a successful career, including as Chief Sustainability Officer for Nike, was personally handpicked by Prince William to become the CEO of the Earthshot Prize and to really bring Prince William's amazing vision for this to reality. So Hannah, thank you so much for your leadership, for everything that you're doing, and we're really delighted to have you here today. Thank you.
One of the things I had to make sure when I left Nike was that I could still wear my Air Force Ones, everybody. So luckily they said I could, and they inserted it into the dress code. I just want to say how wonderful it is to be with you all, and to say that this is actually my favorite bit of the program that has been designed over the next few days, because I think you are the most important people in the entire place. Because you You are courageous, and you will not let anyone stand in your way, and you will help create the future. And if you take anything away from this and the inspiration that we have all taken from President Kennedy, it is believe in yourselves and keep going, even when it's tough, because your dreams are worth pursuing, and we need you to play that role. So with that, I'm so delighted to be with you here today. And we, as a team, the Earthshot Prize team, are thrilled to be in Boston. I've been here for the last 15 days. I practically feel like I've moved to Boston. I've been to 2 Celtics games, and I'm fully converted. But above all, I've also been visiting teams and groups around Boston, and I have been struck by the commitment of the community to working together on climate justice, on resilience, and on helping Boston as a community prepare for a net zero world and to lead on that front. You are doing incredible work, and I would say I think that the world deserves to hear about the work that Boston is doing on climate change. And that really matters, because right now we live in a world of somewhat despondency. How many of you, let's do a poll, how many of you sometimes feel really depressed about climate change? Put your hands up. How many of you sometimes feel like it's such a big problem you don't know where to start? How many of you have got some really good ideas? Yes, that's what I want to hear. So at the Earthshot Prize, we believe that there is a huge problem that we all need to solve. But we also believe that so many people around the world are actually already trying to fix those problems, and that what the world needs most is for those people to be given the spotlight and given the support they need to scale their solutions as fast as possible. And that all began as an idea in Prince William's mind. And let me take you back to when the Earthshot Prize was created. Now, you may know a little bit about Prince William, but if you don't, one of the things you should know is that he has been brought up very much thinking about conservation in particular. And he spent quite a bit of time in Africa visiting conservation projects. And back in 2019, before COVID, he was visiting a project that was enormously successful. They had figured out a way to convert poachers into becoming the conservationists of the animals, and ecotourism projects that would help replace the poaching income with money from ecotourism that was enabling the community to not just survive, but to thrive. And his reflection at the time was, this is an amazing project. Why isn't it being scaled? Why aren't people coming here and using it as a blueprint and sending that all over the world? Why does no one know about this project? And at the same time, he was struck by the voices that he kept hearing, like the people here in this room, those of you that put their hands up and said you felt overwhelmed, you felt anxiety. He was struck that that feeling of anxiety might not actually lead to people feeling they could take action. And the world needed more optimism. And that's where he turned to President Kennedy's moonshot speech. And he thought about the impact of the moonshot speech on the American people. And let's just cast ourselves back on that. And you've all seen the speech, and if you haven't been around the incredible exhibit, you need to go around it. President Kennedy, there's a wonderful series of letters that have inspired me for the last 9 months between him and the vice president, in which basically President Kennedy says, well, do we have what it takes to put a man on the moon and bring him home safely? And Lyndon Johnson basically says, no, absolutely not. This is a really silly idea. We have no money, we have no scientists, we don't know how to get them there. Remember, this was before iPhones, everybody. To which President Kennedy basically goes, yeah, so we'll do it. Never, ever water down your ambition. That's one lesson. Because we always need to be going from what is real and true today and dreaming about what could happen in the future. And we are here to make that happen together. More importantly, what happened in when doing that is that unleashed not just the successful piece about putting a man on the moon and bringing him back safely, it also unleashed a wave of innovation that led to economic and social growth across America. And we believe, all of us, that it led to a mindset that you could turn the seemingly impossible into the possible. And I've lived in America for 18 years. I have an American passport despite this accent. And the reason I came to America 18 years ago was not actually for a job. It was because I loved the mindset of possibility that America had. It is time for us to unleash a wave of innovation around the world, and it is time for us to unleash a mindset of possibility that this can be the Earthshot decade. This is the decade in which each and every one of us can come together and use human ingenuity, a bit of grit, and a ton of collaboration to not get us to the moon, but to help us fix and repair our planet for all. And that is how the Earthshot Prize was born. We are 18 months old. We are so young. We're as young as, you can't imagine. You think we're all grown up? We are so not grown up. We are learning every single day. But here's what we do. We have 5 Earthshot challenges. The first one is about how do we restore our oceans. Now, for those of you that haven't thought about oceans that much, I will tell you, think about oceans. They're amazing. They're not just the source of food or livelihoods for so many of us. They're also incredible carbon sinks. Seagrasses and mangroves protect communities from violent weather. They are essential to our well-being. We need to go about thinking about oceans differently. There's also, the second Earthshot is how do we restore nature? We need nature more than nature needs us. My daughter always says to me, Mom, we're the problem, we're the virus. And I'm like, sure, but in the meantime, let's restore nature and figure out how we live in community with nature. The third one is how do we clean our air? Clean air needs to be a right, not a privilege. And it is essential as part of how we create a safe planet. And the fourth one is how do we get rid of waste? How do we move to a zero waste world in order that the fifth Earthshot becomes true, which is how do we fix our climate? So every year, we scout the world for amazing solutions. And we don't mind if the solution is for-profit, not-for-profit, could be a city like Boston, it could be a country like Costa Rica from last year. What we're looking for is solutions that have shown that they can work, and that if we put a spotlight on them and help them galvanize capital and support, they could make a massive difference and a huge impact. So we scout the earth, and then we have a very difficult process where we look for which ones should go into becoming the top 15 finalists. It's a very, very objective process. So we also make sure that we look for representation. So we want projects from all over the world, led by all kinds of people from all walks of the world. And then from there, a prize council comes together and actually has to choose 5. But we're not an award that after the event, we walk away the next day, because we need to do more than that. And so the day after tomorrow night, when we will announce the 5 winners, we get to work. That's when the team gets to work. And we work not just with the 5 winners, we work with the 15 finalists for at least a year to help them to grow their solution and give them the support and catalyze investment and talent and advice to help them to go to scale. And then we do everything we can to tell the story of what it is they're doing. Because we think that if we can spark the world's imagination, we can inspire a movement that inspires each and every one of you to think, well, hang on a second, I could do that. And why don't I try thinking about doing that when I leave school, or maybe while I'm at school? So let me introduce you to a few of our finalists from last year and this year as examples. And what you're going to realize is that they are people just like you and me. So let me introduce you to someone called Sam. Sam was our winner from last year. He went to Yale and Tufts, actually. And then he and his friend Gator, who were best friends since they were kids, they decided they wanted to do something about the coral reefs because they'd been reading about how the coral reefs were being destroyed. And so instead of leaving their masters and going off and being a business person and doing big consultancy, they basically packed their bags and moved to the Grand Bahamas to try and figure out how they could grow corals that would be acid resistant and heat resistant and be replanted onto dying coral reefs. And so that's what they do. They run an organization called Coral Vita, and they are growing corals back to protect both the marine life, but also the local community life. They're people just like you and I, and Sam is here today. So if you want to meet him, I don't think he's in the room, but he will be wandering around, and you need to meet him. So if you see a guy called Sam, and he's talking about coral reefs, you know who to talk about. Let me tell you the next one, Charlotte. Charlotte is one of our finalists this year, and I visited her in Nairobi about a month ago. Charlotte grew up in the slums of Nairobi, and when you grow up in the slums of Nairobi, you don't have access to sanitation, you don't have access to electricity, and one of the ways of cooking, the only ways of cooking, is to use charcoal and an open fire in your house. So you can imagine that is really dangerous. It's also really bad for your health, and it's really bad for the air pollution. And Charlotte had a young daughter who was injured and burnt by one of these open fires. And so she decided to set up a company, because, why wouldn't you just set up a company when you're in that situation? And she invented a new cooking stove that was made with recycled metal and with a special insulation inside and could use alternatives to charcoal that would not create air pollution and that was safe. And she now runs an all-women organization getting those stoves out into communities all around Kenya. And she is a finalist in this year. Those are just two examples of some of the incredible people that we're meeting, but all of them have ordinary stories to tell. They are all people like all of us. And so that's what I want to leave you with. And I want to leave you with the optimism, but also I want to leave you with a challenge. We need you to believe in yourselves and not let anyone stop you from pursuing your dreams, because you are the generation that will make so much of a difference. I'm going to share a personal story, if you don't mind. So when I was a teenager, it was a little bit difficult. I was a bit of a rebel, and I did keep getting into a bit of trouble, which we won't go into right here. And I think people really wondered what I was going to do with my life. And then I found my passion and my purpose, and I found the problem that I wanted to solve, and that was sustainability and social justice. And that led me on the pathway to where I am today at the Earthshot Prize. So if you take one thing away from being part of this, from the inspiration of President Kennedy's courage and imagination and ambition, and the story of the Earthshot Prize, it is quite simply, you are the people that matter. We need you and your ideas and your determination, and we believe in your ingenuity, your grit, and your ability to solve the problems. And I can't wait to have you all apply to become Earthshot Prize nominees in years to come. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to bring up on the stage Tatiana and Rosemary and Kim for the next part, the panel. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Hannah, for your leadership and partnership and your decision to bring the Earthshot Prize here to Boston. It's an honor to have you here. And it's so exciting to have this, to be kicking it off with this event. And thank you, most of all, to all the students who are here. We're so lucky that you are working hard on building a sustainable, resilient, low-carbon, environmentally just future. And I look forward to hearing and learning more from you on what that future will look like. Thank you to Sandy Edgerly for making this all possible, and my amazing mother, the best ambassador that Australia has ever had, for coming all the way here because she didn't want to miss a second of this particular event. And of course, as always, thank you to Rachel Day Floor, the Executive Director of the JFK Library Foundation, for her tireless work to make sure the legacy of President Kennedy inspires a new generation of people around the world. I'm very excited for this program, and here's how it's going to go. So I'm going to introduce our very distinguished panelists, and then we're going to hear 2 presentations from you guys, followed by a little bit of discussion, and then we want to hear your questions. So first, we have Lieutenant Governor-elect Kim Driscoll, who has been officially serving Massachusetts for almost 25 years, starting in the city of Chelsea, which she helped get back on its feet, and in Salem, where she was elected to be the city's first woman mayor in 2005, after serving on the city council, and has been reelected 4 more times, 5 total. 5. Among many other achievements, Kim put climate change and resilience high on her agenda during her time as mayor, developing a climate change mitigation plan, helping the city to reduce its carbon footprint, and working with the city of Beverly together to develop solutions. She has prioritized offshore wind development, which she plans to continue as lieutenant governor. And just last month, she was elected lieutenant governor with Maura Healey as governor. And together, they will be, Together, they will be the first all-woman executive team to lead Massachusetts, which is so exciting.
Thank you.
It has been said that climate change and climate injustice are man-made problems with feminist solutions, and I have no doubt that the Healey-Driscoll administration will be further proof of that. And we are also very grateful and excited to be joined by Associate Administrator Rosemary Enobakhare, who has been working on climate change and environmental issues and democratic politics for more than a decade. She was first appointed to the E.P.A. by President Obama to serve in the Office of Public Engagement and Environmental Education, which she has now come back to lead in the Biden administration. She also served on the Biden-Harris transition team working on energy and environmental issues. Previously, she was campaigns director for the Hub Project and the coalition director for the Clean Water for All Coalition. She also served as director of African American Outreach for the Democratic National Committee, among other important positions. We're going to shift to the student presentations in a minute, but I would love first to just hear from you both. So I'm going to ask a question. Can you tell us about a climate change or environmental solution that you've learned about recently that is especially exciting to you? So. You want to go? You can go first?
Sure, I'll start. So I've been mayor in Salem for the last 16 years, and my first day in office, we were confronted with a challenge around a coal-fired power plant. Salem had one of what was known as the Filthy 5 remaining coal-fired power plants in Massachusetts. 16 years later, we are now looking at this same port, historic port, nearly 400-year-old city, now being an offshore wind hub. So one of the things I'm really excited about is the ability to convert older coal-fired gateway cities, many of which exist within Massachusetts and New England, and to think about turning what was a place that produced jobs, produced energy. When the coal-fired power plant came to Salem in 1950, I'm pretty sure we were happy to have it. We know better now. We still need the power, but we needed to be clean, and we needed to produce jobs. And we have an opportunity to do that with a clean energy corridor in Massachusetts using our historic ports. So much of what brought prominence to my community in Salem and frankly to Massachusetts was the ocean, the ports, the seaport. And to be able to use our oceans once again to harness something that's going to bring prominence and wealth and opportunities to our Commonwealth, I think is really exciting. And offshore wind offers us that opportunity. So I'm personally really pumped about where we are right now and what we have to grow within that particular space.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, For me, I am not a policy person, so I want to start by saying that. I'm an organizer, and the reason why I decided to go into this work is because climate change is hitting us in every facet of life, essentially. And being able to work with people from across the board, but specifically young people, is something that really excites me and makes me want to do this work. And really, I was really excited to come here and be with all of you all. Young people are really leading the way, and it's just awesome to see that and know that these are the folks who are going to be protecting the environment for me as we look ahead. And so that is something that really continues to keep me going. But also environmental justice is really near and dear to me, and one of the things that I really lean into. One of the things that they didn't say about me in my bio is I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, and I'm sure many of you in here have heard about the things that's going on with the water in Jackson, and a lot of that is being exacerbated by climate change. And so this is something that, again, is near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I'm really focused on and passionate about, and want to make sure that communities just like Jackson across the country have the resources and things that they need, and that's why I'm here doing this work.
That's great. Thank you both so much. Okay, so now we're going to do our student presentation. So please welcome to the stage Michelle and Michael, both seniors at Boston Green Academy, for their presentation, A Tale of Two Cities.
Hello everyone, my name is Michael Diaz.
And I'm Michel Elise.
And we are 12th grade students at Boston Green Academy. So what is redlining? Redlining is a racial discrimination of any kind in housing, but it comes from government maps created for over 200 cities that outline areas where blacks and immigrants were living, and then categorize those areas as risky investments.
But see, these designations needed something to be based off of. So the real estate assessors that created these maps took areas they knew to be high in racial diversity and ethnic minority populations and labeled them as undesirable. As an effect of this branding, people of color became far more likely to be denied loans and other financial services. This led to these minorities being unable to take out mortgages to buy homes, and so they were forced to rent. As renters, they were stripped of a lot of the control they had over where they lived, and many opportunities to create intergenerational wealth were stripped along with that control. Without that inherited wealth to mitigate the splash that was redlining, the ripples it created remained virtually unchallenged and are still felt today within the affected communities through more pollution and overall poorer health. Here is a map of Boston that was created by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which was funded by the federal government. As you can see, pretty sizable chunks of the city, including the heart of the black community, Roxbury, Mattapan, my hometown Dorchester, and South Boston, were decided to be definitely declining or even hazardous. To qualify these designations, they would be paired with qualifying remarks. Here's an example of one up on the slide.
Redlining was banned by the Congress in 1968, but the lingering impacts are still being felt across the nation. 67% of the neighborhoods that were designated as hazardous are still inhabited by mostly minority residents, while 85% of the best neighborhoods are still mid to upper class and mostly white. Boston is not different. Many of the areas that were redlined or deemed as definitely declining are still between 70 and 90% minority populations. Today, we will look at how climate change is impacting our city and how communities that have suffered from redlining are bearing the brunt of an increase in the urban heat island effect as a result of our changing climate.
During the day, heat from the sun is absorbed by the concrete. At night, that stored up heat makes its way back into the surroundings and into the air. This stretches those midday sun high temperatures well into the night, and this process has dangerous side effects, such as increase in risks for dehydration, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke for the affected populations. Let's take another look at that redlining map again. This is the HOLC map on the left, and on the right is a map showing land surface temperatures in Boston today. You see the overlap? It's just like Michael pointed out on the lines that shaped our city slide. This means that not only were the racial and ethnic minorities in Boston historically made to endure injustices like redlining, but those same neighborhoods today are being affected the most from the urban heat island effect. This is by design. And it's not just Boston. Because in 97% of the cities in the US, people of color are more exposed to the impacts of climate change like the urban heat island effect than the white populations who live in the exact same cities.
The HOLC created redlining maps across the whole country. Overall, redline areas of the nation's cities are approximately 2.6 degrees Celsius warmer than non-redline areas. The amount of tree canopy in a city's neighborhood is a great indicator of how much cooler there will be than a neighborhood with less tree canopy. The continuous care of trees over many years is much more expensive than cutting a tree down or just pouring a slab of concrete. People who live in neighborhoods that were redlined didn't have enough money to take care of the trees. Also, homeowners often cut them down to reduce their property expenses. This is one of the reasons why we see less tree canopy in this kind of neighborhoods.
The impacts of the urban heat island effect aren't just going to wind down or blow over, because they're directly correlated with the warming globe and the changing climate. In the summer of 2020, people all over Massachusetts were hit with 20 days of 90-degree temperatures. And by summer of 2030, the city of Boston is projected to have an overwhelming 40 days of 90-degree temperatures. As we know, this is going to impact some people more than others. And if the patterns we've been seeing so far remain consistent, these same communities we've been discussing are going to get hit the hardest. Urban heat islands aren't just an environmental issue. They're a social justice issue. On this slide, you can see more of those neighborhood ratings from the redlining maps we've shown you earlier. Now, though, we've placed them next to a graphic demonstrating the difference between average city and neighborhood temperatures. As you can see, the neighborhoods that have had the lowest neighborhood ratings have had the highest average temperatures. The same neighborhoods that are the most affected by this issue today have been enduring countless social injustices since those first redlining maps were drawn in the 1930s. This is why we need to have discussions about urban heat islands as they pertain to topics like social justice and equity. Because if we can't treat each other better and try to fight injustice in our own neighborhoods, then we can't even begin to discuss on how to treat the planet better.
Excessive heat is a financial load for low-income households. For example, these households normally pay more than average in energy costs, and also often live in energy inefficient homes that are more expensive to keep cool. Developers and landlords need to be incentivized to use strategies to help reduce the urban heat island effect. That's why we got a few solutions that can help reduce the impact of climate change in our most unprotected communities. A green roof or a rooftop garden is a vegetative layer grown on a rooftop. Green roofs provide shade, remove heat from the air, and reduce temperatures of the roof surface and surrounding air. Also, cool roofs are designed to reflect more sunlight than a conventional roof, absorbing less solar energy. This lowers the temperature of the building, just as wearing light colored clothing keeps you cool on a sunny day.
Tree canopy is important because trees and vegetation lower surface and air temperatures by providing shade and through transpiration. And heat pumps are important because they're much more energy efficient than air conditioning units, which not only would contribute to the release of greenhouse gases, but are more expensive and not really options for a lot of people.
As you can see in this graph, carbon dioxide concentrations are higher than they have been in the past 800,000 years. As our temperature rapidly follows, we need to make sure that the most vulnerable populations that have been exploited and discriminated against since the founding of this country are being taken care of. We need to protect everyone from our fastly warming climate, not just those who can afford air conditioning.
Thank you for listening.
Good job. Awesome.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. And I'm wondering, Associate Administrator Enobakhare, if you have any thoughts on that presentation to share.
I just want to say how proud I am of these two and that wonderful presentation. I think, what you all said about heat islands and redlining is true about, some of the things that you've seen is by design, right? Especially when it comes to a lot of these communities of color. And I just really think that, you guys really leaning into this and highlighting and telling us more about this is really important. But I think one of the points that you guys pointed out was doing stuff in your own community. Is so important, and the things that we need to lean in on before we start talking about a wide range of things, right? How can you impact what's happening in your own backyard is really important, and I think that point in particular is a really important point for us to highlight, and I think you guys did a phenomenal job.
I just want to say amazing. Thank you so much for pulling together all of the data, showcasing how we got there, but not just ending there, not just venting there, but giving us some solutions that we can utilize in all of our communities to address heat impact. And know that the work you're doing that you've identified here in Boston, as you said, it's happening across all 351 cities and towns. Intentional redlining that led to economically disadvantaged neighborhoods that are being impacted by climate change in a more aggressive manner. And then what can we do about it? Thank you very much. I think you did an excellent job, and I'm really grateful to be able to see it and be a part of it. I feel a little bit better about our future knowing that you two will be in charge soon. So,
Do you guys have questions for them?
Yeah, I have one. It's kind of like a two-parter. What can you do to fight environmental racism in these communities, and what can we do as youth and as members of these communities to help to create change and help build a more equitable world? Yeah,
I can take it first. Yes. For the administration and President Biden and Administrator Regan, now we are seeing environmental justice being prioritized because these communities have seen the impacts of pollution for far too long. And so we need to make sure that as we think of solutions for issues across the board, that we prioritize communities of color. Because these communities, again, have faced these pollutions and these burdens for far too long. But also making sure that they are part of the conversation. We don't need folks telling people in these communities what the solutions need to be. We need to involve them and engage them in finding the solutions. And so working hand in hand with communities is so important and really critical. And then for you all, what can you do? I think I said it a little bit before, is adding your voice to the conversation. And holding elected officials accountable, the people who are making the rules and the regulations. We need to hear your voices and your lived experiences and your stories, because that really makes a difference in the work that we do as the federal government.
Yeah, I'll start with the second question first. What you can do is not stop doing what you're doing today. This information is critical, but we're all here. We're going to go about our daily lives. There's going to be public hearings and events coming up for new development in your neighborhoods, in your community. There's going to be opportunities for you to participate in a budget hearing to talk about, are we devoting enough money for trees in my neighborhood? Are we doing enough to convert some of our buildings to green roofs? How do we work together to make sure that those of us who have an opportunity to influence what happens and to fund some of it know what those priorities are? And the best way in government is still a lot about squeaky wheels. So don't be afraid or shy or bashful about being a squeaky wheel and showing up. And I just think the information is really powerful. The way you presented it was to continue to think about when you're making your case, using that data to sort of buttress your arguments. It's so compelling. And for me, that's the thing that really moves the needle in action. The data, people showing up and giving us some solutions and ideas on how we can do better.
Thank you both so much. So do you have other questions? Yes? No? Okay. I think we're going to welcome our next presenters, but thank you to Michelle and Michael.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth, and I'm a senior at Boston Green Academy.
Hi, my name is Dalen. I go to Boston Green Academy as well, and I am a senior. I was born with asthma, and I used to be very dependent on my inhaler and my nebulizer machine. I started taking the E.P.A as an infant with my mother, and we relied on that as our form of transportation. Our consistent use of the E.P.A and being around idling buses often caused my asthma to flare up. I also lived in neighborhoods that lacked clean air because they were too close to major roads. This further irritated my asthma as a result of all the air pollution.
Air pollution is caused by many factors. Some are natural, but many are man-made. The main problems are emissions from burning fossil fuels that release greenhouse gases, particulate matter, and can create ground-level ozone. All of these factors come together to damage the environment and health of our planet and communities.
The vast majority of vehicles burn fossil fuels that cause pollutants to be released into the atmosphere. Nitrogen oxides and PM2.5 cause some of the biggest respiratory issues. PM2.5 is an air pollutant, and NOx is created when fuel burns at high temperatures. As you can see, PM2.5 is very small. One of those pink dots is 1/20th of the width of a human hair. And since it's so small, it can easily be inhaled and locked into your respiratory tract.
The health impacts of both NOx and PM2.5 can be incredibly destructive to those who breathe it in. PM2.5 is extremely small, as we saw on the last slide. Because of its small size, when breathed in, it can actually get into your bloodstream and worsen both asthma and heart disease. NOx tends to cause asthma as well as irritate the lungs of those who already have it. It can also increase the risk of respiratory disease, in turn increasing hospital and emergency room visits.
This map was created by physicians at Boston Children's Hospital. It shows how many visits to the ER were made for asthma between 2018 and 2020. The map is broken up into the U.S. Census blocks of approximately 1,000 people per block. The box on the lower left shows Boston more specifically. As you can see, the majority of the city is red. The color red represents a high incidence of asthma compared to other census blocks. This map further proves that people who live in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and other close neighborhoods are much more likely to end up in the ER for asthma than other people living in Massachusetts.
This graph breaks down how many children ended up in Massachusetts emergency departments as a result of asthma. As you can see, Black and Hispanic children are much more likely to end up in the emergency room for asthma. Why is this? As we saw in one of the last slides, city regions are much more densely populated. In addition, they are heavily populated by people of color. The map on the right shows the relative concentration of PM2.5 in the atmosphere, a dangerous pollutant that can make asthma worse. You can also see that some of the highest concentrations of PM2.5 in the atmosphere exist in neighborhoods heavily populated by people of color. As we can see, people of color make up a majority of the population in the neighborhoods of Boston that are disproportionately impacted by respiratory disease. So it only makes sense that in turn, asthma rates and emergency department visits would be just as high in those areas.
Earlier today, you heard how redlining has impacted those who suffer the most from the urban heat island effect. Those same racist policies have been a huge impact on which communities suffer the most from asthma. The citizens of the communities were rated as definitely declining or hazardous are much more likely to end up in the emergency room from asthma. Over 25 million students are riding to and from school every day in the 480,000 school buses that are in the U.S. These buses are burning approximately 857 million gallons of fuel per year and emitting an estimate of over 9 million tons of CO2, alongside with the nitrogen oxides and PM 2.5 produced. This is directly exposing the dangerous pollutants while buses wait idling for students to get on and off the bus.
Another way low-income students are being exposed to air pollution is through school buses. 60% of low-income students ride the bus, while only 45% of non-low-income students ride. Along with repeated exposure to pollution through taking school buses, towards the beginning and end of school days, school buses will sit running idle for more than an hour at times. These buses continuously pump gas and other chemicals into the air around developing children's lungs. This doesn't exactly make for a healthy school environment.
So, what can we do about it? To start, we can invest in our most vulnerable communities. Boston's Green New Deal provides ambitious plans to alleviate this problem by electrifying the entire school bus fleet by 2030. While this paves the way, we recommend that other states follow suit. In addition to this, it is in our community's best interest that we dedicate climate change funding towards historically redlined communities.
The big question is, how can we pay for it?
According to the Brookings Institute, the U.S. spends approximately $20 billion a year to subsidize the fossil fuel industry. We would like to see most of that money diverted to support the transition to electric vehicles and other climate change reduction strategies. We think that much of this money should be focused on making sure that the communities who have historically suffered as a result of pollution caused by the fossil fuel industry receive the necessary funds to create a city that is sustainable and supports all of its citizens. Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. Lieutenant Governor-elect, I wonder if you have any reflections to share on that.
Yeah, I mean, right on. I loved your visuals. I think the solution that you came up with relative to electric school buses is where we all want to go. We need to get there faster and try and find ways to make sure we're solving this issue. This is solvable. Like, we are not trying to cure cancer. We are trying to put electric school bus fleets together across all of our communities, finding the resources to do it, making sure we know how to fix and maintain those buses. We're on this learning journey right now, and I'm thrilled that you picked up on this particular piece, because this one is doable, and we're going to get there.
I second everything that the Lieutenant Governor highlighted. I think, this is a fantastic presentation. Air pollution is something that is so important for us to talk about. Oftentimes when I go into rooms with kids or even with adults, I ask folks to raise their hand if they know somebody who's battling asthma. And literally nobody in the room cannot raise their hand. And it's a problem that we're seeing every day. And there's a young person in the audience today who is a Presidential Environmental Education Award winner. E.P.A. hosts this program in conjunction with the White House and President Biden. His name is Raul Ram. Is Raul in the audience today? Oh, that's him. Hi. So Raul. I just wanted to highlight him. I'm not calling him to the stage, but I just wanted to highlight him because he did a presentation and a project on air pollution. And the president saw his presentation and his project and wanted to highlight it, right? So air pollution is something that we need to be talking about and highlighting, and it's something that we need to be combating. And the president has really leaned in to make sure that he focused a lot on air pollution. So EPA is doing a ton of different steps around fossil fuels and power plants, but I want to speak specifically to clean school buses. E.P.A. received $5 billion, and my boss liked to say billion with a B, to bring electric school buses into fleets across the country. We got this from the infrastructure bill that passed through Congress, and so we were able to create a clean school bus program where we're able to provide, again, clean school buses to schools across the country. And the thing about this program that President Biden and Administrator Regan did was make sure that we prioritize communities of need. And so communities, usually those are underserved communities or overburdened communities, where those communities will be prioritized to get that money first for school buses. And as you highlighted, a lot of those communities are dealing with air pollution at an alarming rate. So thank you guys for the wonderful work that you're doing here to bring attention to this important issue.
Do you guys have a question for our guests?
Yes, we have one. Okay. How can young people put pressure on elected officials to ensure that historically marginalized communities have access to clean air, because it should be a right?
You know, from my perspective, the ability to have young adults participate in governing. Many of our school committees actually have high school students serving on them. Many of our communities have youth commissions. Reaching out locally, which might be easier. I mean, I think states and federal government want to certainly be strong partners. Cities and towns can't do this work alone. But showing up and participating, utilizing your voices that already exist within these seats, I think networking together. Many of the remarks the presentations we saw today involved Boston, but we know that could be overlapped over Springfield or Worcester or Salem or Lynn or many of our gateway cities. Finding your counterparts in gateway cities and having a unified action and approach to showing up at some of the bodies that are making decisions in these spaces, school committees, city councils, talking to mayors, lieutenant governors, governors. That's a really powerful way to make sure we're prioritizing where these resources are going and aren't forgetting that this needs to be at the top of the list. And lastly, just putting our thumb on the scale for the communities that are impacted the most. Most of our gateway cities are serving economically disadvantaged immigrant populations. That's where the coal-fired power plants ended up. That's where the things that contributed to these conditions that we have. So that's where we need to put our thumb on the scale with the solutions as well, and reminding us of that on a regular basis.
I would say, I think you talked about it. You talked about how you have asthma, right? And telling your own personal story is really important because people can connect with that. They can identify with that because a lot of people have that same experience. And again, for the administration and Michael Regan, my boss, Administrator Regan, he really wants to make sure that young people not only have a seat at the table, but also a voice in the conversation. And so I don't want to break news here, but we've said this before. The administrator wants to create a youth council at E.P.A. to make sure that, we have all these federal advisory committees at E.P.A., but we don't have one that's specifically focused on young people. And to be honest, this administration wouldn't be active if it wasn't for young people who had made their voices heard at the polls. Right? And so we want to make sure that those voices are heard throughout the halls of E.P.A. and throughout the halls of the broader federal government. And so making sure that we do that work and work with young people is really important for us and really important for making sure that we provide the solutions that are needed.
I think it's so, can you hear me? Yes. It's so important to remember also, if you don't do this work, somebody else will, and they may not care about the same things that you do. So it's really important to fight for the things that you care about and to stay involved. But thank you both so much. Can we give them another round of applause? And now we're going to move to questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and members of the staff are walking around with microphones, so they will find you. when you're called on, please stand and say your first name and the school that you attend. So I know there have to be questions because you guys, these presentations were so awesome. Okay, we have one over here. Yeah, sure.
What can you do to like change the buses to make it not toxic in the air? Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your name and what school are you from?
My name is Johan and I go to the Rafael Hernandez School.
All right, hi Johan. Good to have you here. So did everybody hear Johan's question? What can we do to make sure the buses are a little bit cleaner than they are right now? As this presentation talked about, having electric buses. You know, a few years ago, electric buses were just an idea. They didn't exist and weren't being manufactured. Many of us were talking about it, but they didn't exist. Now they do in varying degrees, and you're seeing pilot programs in many of our communities, but the buses are expensive, and we need to train our mechanics on how to fix them and what fleet maintenance looks like. So that's why these pilot programs are going to be helpful. So encouraging more pilot programs, continuing to have strong partners at the state and federal government to help fund those initiatives and get rid of those buses, helping us get more bus drivers, because that's one of the things we need right now, a lot of, is going to be helpful. And next, we're going to take on trains, Johan. So that's what we got to work on, electrifying our commuter rail, for one example.
Oh, here?
My name is William Moran, and I'm from the East Boston High School. And I want to know, why can't we just use solar power on everything?
Wish we could.
I mean, I wish it were that easy. But I mean, I think that there are a lot of different avenues to make sure that we have clean energy. And so being able to spread that out from solar to wind and other clean energy, I think is really important to be able to diversify, our energy grid. So I think that, solar is awesome, but there's so many other mechanisms to make sure that we are able to have clean energy.
Here.
Hi, I'm Charlie from Boston College High School, and I was just wondering, kind of, Massachusetts is doing a lot for the climate, but not every state is at the same level, and not every state is willing to go to that same level. So how could we kind of navigate those conversations and encourage the entire United States to kind of go forward in that charge to try and help fight climate, help fight environmental injustices, and help promote a cleaner Earth?
Yeah. I would say advocacy is really, really important. And the fun thing about my job is I get to work with groups across the spectrum, from environmental justice groups to green groups to youth groups. I think really leaning in and building power amongst yourselves, right, is really important. And holding elected officials accountable is really how you do that. But also using your power to vote, and voting elected officials who want to make sure that we have clean energy and who are focused on combating climate change, I think is really important in order to be able to do that type of work.
Great.
We had one in the back.
Hi, my name's Adni Duale. I go to Boston Land School, and I was just wondering, is the fact that those best neighborhoods are predominantly white is because of how expensive they are? Like, it's harder for people of color to be like billionaires and stuff, and I'm just white families are usually richer, and so it's easier for them to earn money in that case. So I'm just wondering if these best neighborhoods are more expensive than these dangerous considered ones. Sorry if that was a little...
Well, maybe we can just talk, it's a deep subject, but certainly our first presenter has talked about redlining. And redlining has had a long-lasting impact in Massachusetts and places across, frankly, this country, that kept out people of color and immigrants from neighborhoods. And you're seeing this long-lasting impact of that. And they happen to be neighborhoods that maybe oftentimes are a little more suburban or have more trees or have higher home ownership. I don't think it's a case that can't be turned, that we can't do more about that. And that's one of the reasons we talk about investing in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, because it was a purposeful consequence of some of the actions around redlining, around zoning, that currently exist still today. So lots of work to do in that space. And the more, frankly, we're able to talk about it openly as to why we need to invest in all of our neighborhoods, but particularly put our thumb on the scale and invest more in places that have higher concentrations of economically disadvantaged and immigrant neighbors tied to prior and longstanding policies that we need to overturn. And this is the work that we do together.
Hi, my name is Tatiana. I go to the Rafael Hernandez. And my question is, like, how can we help, like, what can we do to help at home about, like, the pollution and the asthma problem of, like, the world, practically?
Did you say your name was Tatiana? That's
Yes.
2 Tatianas here.
It's always so great to meet another Tatiana.
Hey, can I say one thing, Tatiana? One of the things that we didn't talk about today that I think is really helpful and can be really hard in communities is getting people out of their cars. So much of what we do in our world is connected to getting in a car and driving someplace. And frankly, I just drove here by a car, and oftentimes there's only one person in a vehicle. We call it like single occupancy vehicles. The more we can do, you, your friends, your peers, as you're getting older, to find ways to get around. And we need to invest in safer bike paths and alternatives and making public transit work and be more convenient. But opportunities to not have the car be the main mode of travel is so important as we move forward. In Salem, we have a goal we call our North Star of being car light, a community that you don't have to own a car to get around. We've invested in bike shares and ride shares and public shuttles, and we really want to make sure that we have options to make it safe for alternatives so that we're not worried about those emissions if you're able to get around and not need a car. And that involves land use. Are you close to a grocery store? How do we make sure the things that are happening in your neighborhood are things that you need so that you're close by? I think there's opportunities for us to think about not just what we can do to have more e-vehicles and reduce emissions, but traffic and congestion, whether it's in an e-vehicle or in a regular gasoline-powered vehicle, is still congestion and contributes to poor quality of life. So thinking about other ways to get around and supporting that. It can be really hard in a community to remove parking, to put in a bike lane, even if that made everyone safer, because the car is still king in many of the places where we live. So thinking about that as you're approaching a driver's license age would be helpful to those of us in city halls and state houses looking to make investments in more biking and public transit.
My name's Luca. I'm from the British International School of Boston. And I was wondering, as we've seen a decline in the economy of America because of the recent pandemic, how can we help, as students, guide the money towards low-income areas to help fund their environment and make it a better area for them?
I think we've said it, before is making your voice heard and prioritizing communities that have been underserved and overburdened with pollution. I think that's really important. Environmental injustice we're seeing it all across the country, and we need to make sure that we're advocating for those communities in a very robust way.
Back.
Where do the electric buses come from, and how many students can they fit?
Typically, the electric buses they can be different sizes, but they meet the same size as a regular school bus. And frankly, many of them were being manufactured overseas. We're trying to make sure more of them are being manufactured locally now.
In the back there on that end, she's waving back and forth and someone else is pointing at her.
Oh, your E.P.A. student has a question.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Rahul Ram, and I live in Westford and go to Stony Brook. And for the bus issue and how you were talking about how buildings are like having extreme hot air and it's like lots of humidity and it's hot. There's vertical wall farming, which is basically farming on the exterior walls of buildings, and by using this, we could regulate the temperature because plants take in CO2 in the air. So all the hot air and CO2 can be transported to the plant and can release cold air, which can regulate the temperature. And by using this, workers in buildings can have a place to not be like sweating and be tired. So this may be a good solution to this issue.
I love that. Excellent. Just to respond to him, I just want to say, if you want a job at E.P.A, give me a call. And I want to also know, is David Cash in the building? Our regional administrator, he is here in Boston, and he wants all of you all to come and engage with him in our local Boston office. So any of you guys are all super smart, super talented, and we want to engage with you.
I think we had one over here.
Hi, my name is Stephania. I go to the East Boston High School. I wanted to ask a question about the green rooftops. I think on one of the presentations, I was really caught into that idea. I think it's really beautiful. And I wanted to ask, will we be seeing more rooftops in the future in the city of Boston, because it will decrease the air pollution? That's it.
Yeah, I think you will in Boston and many communities throughout Massachusetts. Yeah, you'll definitely be seeing more green rooftops and providing opportunities for people to go what we call net zero, to produce a building that really reduces emissions. That might be solar, that might be green roofs, it might be heat pumps, but really working on ways that we can mitigate emissions from buildings, because buildings are one of the biggest greenhouse gas contributors that we have. So we have work to do when we create new ones and certainly for the existing buildings that are here.
Okay, we have this one in the front here.
My name is Lasara. I go to the David A. Ellis. My question is, what is President Joe Biden doing to help Black and brown community?
Yes. Well, President Biden is doing a lot to help Black and brown communities. I mean, specifically talking about on the environment. You know, environmental justice is really important for the president. I think he is one of the only presidents who's really leaned in on environmental justice in such an aggressive way. One, he has Michael Regan as the E.P.A. administrator, and Administrator Regan has really focused on prioritizing communities of color in a very real and robust way, right? So for him, he launched a program called The Journey for Justice, where he is going across the country in these communities like Cancer Alley, which is in Louisiana, or places like Jackson, Mississippi, who I think, you know, we talked about, who's dealing with a significant water crisis, right? And making sure that we're finding solutions for these communities immediately, right? And prioritizing these communities. And so when the administrator went to Jackson and when he went to Cancer Alley in Louisiana, he found some solutions that really gave these communities some relief, or that things that these communities have needed and asked for years, for decades, right? And so he's working to make sure that we're prioritizing those communities, but also he's making sure that these historic investments that we have received from things like the American Rescue Plan and the infrastructure law, that money is prioritized for communities of color as well. So the president is really focused on environmental justice and making sure that we're righting the wrongs of the past.
There in the blue hoodie. Yeah. in the turquoise. You. Didn't you have a question? You were raising your hand? Okay.
Hello, my name is Diusmel. I'm from the school Rafael Hernandez.
Okay.
And my question is, what will you guys do to fix the trains? I know that you guys are trying to fix the buses too, but what about the trains?
It's an excellent question. Those of us who live in Massachusetts, particularly in Greater Boston, have experienced some declining travel on our buses and our trains. And so there's a lot of work and effort going in to make sure we've got the investments we need to modernize the system. That means improve the current way we operate, and then also to think about how we expand and get better. We know we have, Salem has the busiest commuter rail stop in the system. We have the most buses, the most trains, and the most people of the commuter rail system that use that particular train every day. And so we know directly it impacts people's quality of life when they don't have access to it. We want that train line electrified, which means you could have more trains, lower headways, and less emissions. First, we've got to get them all working right, and there's a lot of good thinking going into how do we have the right collection of people who are experienced, the right amount of resources to support a good state of repair, and then also be thinking about how do we modernize it in the future so that you can live further away where it might be a little bit less expensive, so we can grow the economy not just in Greater Boston, but throughout the Commonwealth. So stay tuned is the answer on that one, okay?
Okay, this is going to be the last question. I'm sorry, everybody.
My name is Ava Noon. I'm from Danvers High School. Just a problem that I've noticed as a young person advocating for change is getting people that are older in positions of power, taking us seriously and listening to what we have to say. And so what I'm wondering is what you guys would recommend for us to not only ensure that we get our voices out there, but to make sure we're being heard from these people.
I mean, I would say consistency, right? For us, when we came into the administration, young people were at our doorstep daily, protesting, doing letter writing campaigns, emails, on social media. I think all of these avenues are things that make people pay attention to you. And so I would say use your voice and leverage the platforms that you have in order to use that voice as well.
I think growing your voice with others is really powerful, not just in Danvers or in the North Shore, but thinking about regionally. I mean, you have the power of an ability to communicate without having to be in the same community. Linking your interests with others who are in Springfield, who has some of the highest asthma rates in the Commonwealth, is in Springfield, Massachusetts. Also the Basketball Hall of Fame, for anybody who's interested in that. But my point is, you can connect with other people and lift up your voices throughout the Commonwealth. And I also want to say, like, as someone who's been a mayor, who is a mayor, who's soon to be a lieutenant governor, who's a mom, like, I really value hearing from young people and young adults. Not just hearing, but listening towards action. So I want to say thank you for being here, all of you, and help us make sure we know what's on your minds. Don't just talk to each other. Definitely continue talking to us.
Thank you all so much, and that was a great question to end on. I'm sorry we have to end, but I think there are like hundreds of you in this room now, and so you know that there are people like you, different from you, from all over the city who care about the same things that you care about, and I hope that makes you feel like you're not in this alone. And I think, people always ask me what makes me feel hopeful, and I think, hope is in doing stuff together. Hope is in action. And so having you all here today, having you take such an interest in these issues and in your communities, and speaking up about injustice and about climate change and about the future and what we all have at stake is really inspiring. So I hope that everybody had a great afternoon, and thank you both, and thank you all for being here.